How many books do you need to write to become a professional writer? And today we are going to be hearing from one of the literary goats, Don DeLillo, on what it takes. And guys, I want to talk to you first because many of you guys have released books out there. And so I want to bring it to the community because this is a community centric group. I read all of your guys' comments. I make videos stemming from your comments all the time. And so for those who have written books before, when did you feel like it finally clicked and that you were a real writer, like a professional? Like, I'm now doing this at a high level? Because most people, if you're being honest, don't feel that way about their first book. Like, okay, there are some good elements, but this isn't a masterpiece yet. And Don DeLillo says that, quote, well, this is actually David Foster Wallace quoting Don DeLillo. Don DeLillo told me that the first book was a gift and you don't know how you wrote it. The second book, you really teach yourself to write. By the time you finished it, you know you can write books. And I think that's true. After book two, it's like you finally become a professional writer. And so while studying for this video, I went back to my bookshelf back here and looked at a lot of the people who are turned out and looked back at their bibliography and was like, okay, when did things really start to pick up? And it's somewhat true that by book 3 to 5, and especially by book 3, they really started to move into the zone where they were building toward their peak, where they really started to find their vibe, find where things were able to be put together and start to climb. Because, for instance, if you read Haruki Murakami's first two novels, I think After the Wind Sings and Pinball, those are the rough names of those. They are absolutely garbage, you guys. Like, I don't want to be mean here, but they are like almost not readable. And I'm a big Murakami fan. I had to slog through those just so I could say I read Murakami's bibliography. But Murakami's third novel, A Wild Sheep Chase, is honestly good. It's not his best novel, but if you look at a lot of the elements he was working with in book 1 and 2, they all get incorporated into A Wild Sheep Chase. And then when you look at Murakami's peak with like Wind Up Bird Chronicle, Norwegian Wood, and Kafka on the Shore, many of the things that he worked out in A Wild Sheep Chase came to their complete fruition during that peak. And I should also note that many of the authors I'm talking about here spent over 3,000 hours on their novels, every one of them. Some of the authors spent 5,000 or 10,000 hours on their novels. And that is deep work hours, not just, hey, I'm going to write on my phone for 20 minutes or I'm going to write as my kids are running around, but multiple hours at a time, every single day for over a year or however long it takes to reach that number. And I just want to say that's an important point to make because there are going to be some people commenting or some people seeing this video who spend less than 1,000 real hours working on their novel, even though they maybe feel like they've spent 5,000 hours. If they kept track of the undistracted hours that they spent writing their book without looking at their phone, just completely dialed in, most people who call themselves novelists are spending less than 1,000 hours. And so what's interesting is that their numbers will be inflated, that it may take them 8 or 9 novels to get to this feeling. And there should be also something asked that where is the magic in writing? That most likely it's in the revision stages when you are doing sentence structure and like really trying to bring the vibe out of the novel and really trying to dial that down. Not in the first 1,000 hours. I know from my own experience that the first 1,000 hours are the easiest part, where I just get to focus on the plot and a lot of the main stuff and tinker around, and having to do all the microing of sentences and thinking and sitting with it. That's the hard part. And that's why people quit and just release their novels, because they feel like it's done. And most of the time it's because they don't actually have the ability to make it better. Because if you gave that same story to a legendary author, they could make it wildly better. And so I'm going to run through a couple more examples. David Foster Wallace's third book was Infinite Jest. His first two books, one was a short story collection and the other was a novel, were decent, and he was building toward this moment. And almost everything he worked on those two novels helped him get over the edge. Cormac McCarthy's third novel was Child of God, which was a money grab, but his fourth novel, which we could consider his third novel, is Suttree, which is by far his best work if you are looking at it from a literary sense. You know, Blood Meridian is much more intense and much more relatable to people. But Suttree, if you look at the writing and what he is doing there, it's 5 times as complex as Blood Meridian and beautiful. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby as his third novel. And if we look at DeLillo's advice, the first book is a gift in the sense that you don't know how you wrote it. It was given to you and you got through it. And that sent you down this aisle of becoming a writer. Like, we don't know why we exactly got here. There are plenty of other artistic mediums that are much more effective in terms of getting an audience and getting attention and getting a message out there than writing. And how the hell did we end up with this one? Then in the second book, you are teaching yourself to write because you have a higher standard. You understand the process now, so you have more time and more space to actually try to make it better. I got this. This is such a funny thing because what was Thomas Pynchon's third novel? Oh, wait, Gravity's Rainbow. I don't think people understand that. Like, DeLillo knows that there is like a psychic connection sometimes with some of these questions. Toni Morrison, her best novel, in my opinion, is her third novel, Song of Solomon with the Milkman. Don DeLillo's third novel was Ratner Star, where it's some, I don't want to say it's not controversial because no one ever really reads it and no one cares about Don DeLillo, but it's what is more complex and confusing novels for sure, and very influential though on David Foster Wallace and many others because it was like one of the first times someone outside of Pynchon really started to push the limits of literary fiction, like with science and other things. Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, his third novel, one of his best. If you look at what he's doing there, that became kind of a staple of his career. The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen is his most popular novel, most well-known novel, third novel. There's a man named James Joyce who wrote his third novel titled A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which for many who don't want to read Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake is his best novel. But a lot of the stuff he does there does build in across his entire career. The Plague by Camus, probably his best novel, not my favorite of his, probably the best though. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. Italo Calvino, one of my favorites, third novel, Invisible Cities, which I think maybe his best, one of the more beautiful novels ever released in the 20th century. So I could sit here all day and just hit this concept over your head, but most likely you are not going to get over the edge until you write 3 novels that have more than 3,000 hours put into each one of them. And like I said, that is an extreme number. It is going to be hard for you guys to get there. It's going to take years to get there. It's going to take 3 to 5 years. And that's why I talk about the literary renaissance, because the literary renaissance is happening on Substack.com. Because during those 3 to 5 years, that doesn't mean that you don't need to be writing. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be making connections and releasing your backlog and connecting with other writers who will also help you with your work. But if you guys want to read my writing and connect with other writers, I have no affiliation with Substack in terms of sponsorship, but that's where the literary renaissance is happening. Go make an account on Substack.com. Follow me. Follow other people. Go follow some of the greatest authors that are alive right now who are on Substack and look at what they are doing. And spend your time writing your novel and spend the other time that you have where you can't deep work, but maybe you can tinker or do some easy creation stuff and put all that on Substack. Because as I always say, the worst thing that an author can do is release a book to nobody and just post it on Kindle. It's the saddest thing I've ever seen. And it happens every single day, and it's probably happened to you. And one of my missions is to guarantee that that doesn't happen anymore. And so hopefully your third novel is going to be the gateway to everything else. But first, you are going to have to sit down and spend about 10,000 hours to get the first 3 done.